I'm Steph.
And I'm Jeff. Each week, we review a film that's streaming online.
As writers, we'll deep dive into the characters and plot to tell you if it's a good story.
Listen at your own risk. This review contains spoilers.
Now sit back
Relax
and
and
enjoy
enjoy
Stream
Stream On.
Today, we'll be reviewing I Am Mother, streaming on Netflix.
In a grim future, Daughter is the only human inhabitant of an underground bunker. She is cared for by Mother, a kindly, if stern, robot. When a survivor shows up at the door, the truth of Daughter's world is revealed.
I Am Mother is directed by Grant Spatore. It's written by Grant Spatore and Michael Lloyd Green, and it is his directorial debut film. It's based on an original story that Grant and Michael had written. It's a 2019 Australian sci-fi. The film stars Clara Rugard as daughter, Hilary Swank as woman, Rose Byrne in the voice of the robot mother, and Luke Hawker as the body of Mother. He acts in a full body creature suit, and he's actually a bit famous for in-suit performances. He was also Krampus in the holiday horror flick and used a full body creature suit in that film as well.
Okay. So, Steph, this is your choice. What did you like about it, or what drew you to this movie?
So I was drawn to this because, we are at the point where things are opening up a bit more post-pandemic. And so I was just in the mood for a post-apocalyptic movie. I love sci-fi. Sometimes it's just nice to see like a survival story of the human spirit in a post-apocalyptic world and exiting the bunker, that type of feel. I was also curious as a mom how robot mama would be portrayed. So that's why I chose this film.
Okay. So, let's jump into the plot. What would you like to focus on first?
So the first thing that I wrote as something that would be interesting to talk about from a writer's lens is that this film uses the bad robot trope, which is a common trope in post-apocalyptic films. Oftentimes the robot is not good, right? Even if the robot starts out being good, I went in with this film with the expectation that the robot was going to turn against humans in some way, shape, or form. This is not Wall-E. This is very much more of that Terminator type feel, or at least that's what I had set up in my head, knowing how these films typically go. So the film starts off showing robot as good and a protector of daughter, raising her in this bunker and the outside world is considered toxic. It's has we find out later as the film progresses, it has these hostile robots running around called dozers, and Mother is the only good robot, so we think. And then it also just has that, so there's you've got the outside world being an antagonist with all these hostile dozers, and then you've got Mother who is good but we know is going to progress to be an antagonist. So my first question to you is, do you think it hurts the enjoyment of a film to going into the film, because of this type of film, know that there's a high likelihood that the robot's going to turn bad?
No, it doesn't. And the reason has to do with the robot's motivations in this. So, when you're using a trope, the thing I think as an author you want to do is take some sort of archetype or some sort of story element that's well used, like killer robots, but put a different kind of twist on it. And in the case of this movie, and the reason why this particular killer robot works, is that her motive is not what you would typically see. Most films that feature, killing machines, it's either something like the Terminator, where it's out of self-preservation, the human race is a threat to the robot and needs to be wiped out, or it's a malfunction. I was just watching Saturn III, a movie from like 79, 80 with Farrah Fawcett and Kirk Douglas and Harvey Keitel, and that features like a malfunctioning robot that's trying to kill people. This film, however, the robot and as we later learn, the artificial intelligence that actually controls all these robots, has an altruistic motive, even if that altruistic motive starts off with her exterminating most of the human race. And I think that twist on this trope made it worthwhile and interesting.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because it makes for a complex antagonist versus a very one-dimensional antagonist, because in Mother's mind, she believes she is doing the right thing to create a superior human race. So, in a nutshell, the human race was polluting the planet and wars and blah blah blah, and so the superior intelligence decided that the human race is not, it needs to basically be reset. So they create a bunch of dozers, these, combat robots, and they exterminate the human race and start over with embryos with the idea that they will raise a human to be human 2.0, a superior species that is not going to wreck the planet like our current species human 1.0 does. But what we learn as daughter learns that she is not the first of this new superior human species that's being raised, that mother had lots of trial and errors before her, and that she basically, like, every year the kids she was raising would have to pass a series of tests. And if they didn't pass in one area, she would exterminate them. And then basically, like, there was this big crematory where she found like bones of previous daughters. And so she would delete them like she would broken code. She is the enemy to humans in that way, because any perceived flaw she is going to get rid of. And daughter was the first that had made it to, like, being, I think she was 16 years old in the film. Like, she had made it far enough, and so she was passing like her final test. So it just made her a more complex villain, because she believed that she was doing the right thing to improve the human race.
Exactly. It's interesting that you mentioned the plot twist, because I do want to jump into that because it is telegraphed within the first 90 seconds of the movie. We see Mother extracting what will turn out to be the first of three embryos and putting it into a birthing machine or an artificial womb. And there is text on the screen saying it is day one. And then when we later see what is presented in a growth and training montage, an educational montage, appears to be the same girl. But then we see it's like day 13,000, whatever. I am not a math major, but even I know that is far longer than 16 years. It's actually about 38 years. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, clearly this is not the first daughter that's been created. That really took away a lot of the interest from this movie for me. Not all of it. I still think it was a good movie, but when you're going to do that kind of twist, telegraphing it like that really undercuts it. And for a movie that had an interesting take on the motivations of the killer robot, to be so ham-fisted with that, that is not the way to handle a twist in your movie. I mean, what did you think about that? Did you see that? Did you pick up on that? Did it register with you?
So it actually didn't register for me, because I love montage scenes, so I was just focused on the montage itself and the training, and I didn't pay attention the way you did to that text. I wonder how many people would pick up on that, or and would that ruin their enjoyment as well? So yeah, so that did not do it, but I was fully expecting, I was looking for all these little clues along the way that mother is not good, and that she is going to turn on daughter in some way, shape, or form. To me, the better, since I knew that was going to happen anyway, the better plot twist for me in this film was learning that mother was actually the head dozer, that was controlling all the others, like a hive mind or a single consciousness. Uh, I liked that part of the twist. Found it to be slightly less predictable than Mother is Bad Robot. The issue I had, even though it was an enjoyable plot twist, there was some plot holes around that twist itself. For example, if she controls all the technology and is like the queen bee, so to speak, of the robot hive, then there's all these scenes of her going around the bunker looking for daughter, and daughter's trying to hide from her because she's trying to protect woman who came into the bunker because woman was injured outside from the dozers, and like all these decontamination scenes that mother is doing that's completely a ruse because there's nothing that needs to be decontaminated. Like I don't know. Like I had a hard time thinking through all those scenes we watched of if mother can just control all and see all in the bunker, like why would she need to do all this sneaking around looking for daughter? I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
There was the opportunity to fix that. And the way they could have fixed it would have been to make it crystal clear at the end that mother had actually been monitoring everything daughter was doing, but allowing it to go on. That this was part of her final ethical test.
And she was pretending to be looking for daughter and things like that, so to not let on that she knew more.
Right, but it's not presented that way to the audience. It is presented as if daughter is sneaking around, mother is looking for her, mother doesn't know what she's doing. How much control does mother really have over a situation that, by the end of the film, I think we're supposed to assume was pretty much managed by her? That everything we see was part of this final test.
There is a scene that shows that she is recording some of the conversations that daughter and woman are having that daughter thinks are just between the two of them when they're talking about like daughter's thinking of escaping the bunker with woman. And so we know that there's bugs in the rooms where a mother can hear. So you would think if you can hear, you should also be able to see into these rooms. So yeah, it's one of those plot holes that's just not well.
Well, and maybe that scene was put there to address just the thing I'm talking about. That the filmmakers decide, well, we don't need to have this robot sitting in front of a bank of monitors and creepily watching everything daughter does. That this scene will kind of show that, yeah, she does have awareness of everything happening in this facility. I think I would have liked it a bit more explicit, that's all. I was really disappointed in the final scene with mother and the woman. The woman shows up at this bunker about halfway through the movie, and she's clearly there as a catalyst for the rest of the story to get daughter to grow and start to question everything she's heard from mother. We later find out after the two humans escape from the bunker that she's been living in a shipping container, apparently eating 40-year-old canned corn, which is still good. At the end of the film, daughter has gone back to the bunker, has basically destroyed the mother unit in the bunker, and is getting ready to start raising the humans because mother's like, you basically have passed. You're human 2.0. You're the ethical human that I wanted. Mother then sends one of her drones to the woman and has this weird moment where she's like, how do you think you survived all this time? So clearly, the artificial intelligence is keeping her alive for this reason and then kills her. It ties things off, but it does leave some questions like, why did the woman show up at the bunker in the first place? It's shown to be a fair distance from where she's living. There's no particular reason why she would go to what looks like a facility that these robots are using. And she would have to cross multiple areas that are clearly robot controlled. There's like these cornfields that are being raised in this wasteland. And she would have to go through all that to get to the bunker. The disappointing part and the thing I think they missed out on is that this could have been an explanation for what happened to at least one of the earlier attempts to raise a daughter. That instead of them both, the two that we see were birthed, we're to understand that they were both killed because they failed one of these ethical tests. I honestly thought that this woman was going to wind up being the first daughter, the one that we actually see at the beginning of the movie, and that something failed, but mother kept her around for this purpose. That eventually she would need another person that then daughter would need to make ethical choices about. And that would then explain a lot, including how she even wound up at the bunker, but also would tie up some loose ends. And that is not what happened. And I found that part disappointing because it was an obvious way to tie off some plot lines that kind of left open. And it didn't make as much sense as the alternate ending I just mentioned would have. So, what did you think about that? Did that bother you? Any? Did you have any thoughts about that?
So woman claims that she was living in these like caves with other humans that were trying to hide from the dozers, and that was how they were surviving, but that she left the caves because people were starving, going crazy, and she is the last human that she believes is alive, the last of the human 1.0s. It doesn't make sense that she would have been able to survive this long unless mother allowed it, because there we see hellscapes of robot controlled areas, and there's just these robots are fairly smart and intelligent. They would have been able to kill her fairly easily, and she comes into the bunker because she was injured by one of the dozers. In some ways it makes sense that she was kept alive for this one test, but then I'm thinking, well, but what about all the other fails? Like, was she keeping a are there other humans she's keeping alive for that reason? Like, I do think it would have been cool though to have it be the first. I do like that idea, but that part didn't bother me as much as it did you. The whole like when the robot goes and kills, it's almost like I've kept you alive for a purpose, and now your purpose is done. Kill. I think what bothered me the most in terms of mother's motives is that her motive is presented as creating this superior human race, human 2.0, smarter, more ethical humans. And there's an emphasis on the more ethical part. But mother doesn't model that behavior. She models lying, killing, environmental destruction, I mean, extermination of the human species. She doesn't model herself ethical behavior. So, how can she raise an ethical human being? That to me is the biggest plot hole of this whole thing. If this is how daughter's been raised by this robot that clearly thinks it's okay to exterminate humans for the smallest flaws, how is she going to actually do a good job raising all of these like other embryos that are sitting around ready to hatch? I don't perceive that she's going to do a very good job because she has not been raised by the most ethical creature. The other thing that I have an issue with is in terms of killing women, if the whole point is to raise a superior human species as ethical and able to survive in extreme circumstances, woman is one the test. If you buy into the logic that woman is the last of the humans to survive, wouldn't she be the more superior than daughter? Because daughter's lived this sheltered life. She doesn't have an adapted intelligence to make it in the outside world successfully. Like she only has what she knows in the bunker, really. There are a lot of plot hole things that I have issues with, but I would say that's the biggest one is mother's motives of raising a superior ethical human species, but not being ethical herself. Did that bother you at all?
No, for a couple of reasons. There is an early scene in the film of daughter undergoing some ethical training, some ethical teaching, and she is presented with a variant of the streetcar dilemma. The idea, you can save one person, you can save five people. How do you make that choice? But you're going to kill either one person or five people, right? And she's given a version of that about organ donors, I think. One person donating organs, and that doesn't matter if some of the five people getting organs were killers or what have you, or does it matter if that one person was a killer? I think we're supposed to see that mother made that choice. Her choice was it is better to save the one person, even if it means exterminating the mass of humanity. The idea being, when she made that ethical choice, was that the needs of the one in this case outweigh the needs or rights of the many. She's not trying to raise a human who's better suited to survive. Daughter and her siblings, when they finally emerge from the bunker, are going to be presented with a world that's been re engineered. Clearly, that's what we learn even from some dialogue between woman and daughter, where woman says it was harder to breathe before, but now their machines are planting. We, like I said, we see rows of corn and things like that. But I think the implication is that Mother is geoengineering the planet to be a, if not a paradise, at least someplace where her new breed of humanity is not going to have to be so survival oriented. Everything will be basically there for them materially to lead good lives, and then it becomes the ethics is the important thing, that the new humans will be more ethical, not that they'll be better necessarily at physical survival. So those things that don't really bother me. The problem, like I said, I had more to do with just some of the plot issues just around woman and what she was doing, but not so much that she was a better example of a survivor, mostly because we find out that the only reason she survived is that mother let her. So she was as much a prisoner as daughter, she just didn't realize it.
Hmm. Yeah, the way that the film portrayed it. Yeah, and I guess in terms of Mother's version of a superior ethical human being, that the ethical human in her new world would kill their young if they felt that their young was not smart enough and didn't pass whatever test. So maybe that's the new world order. If you hatch a kid and they don't pass some test because they had a bad day when they took the test, sorry kid, you're being exterminated and thrown in the incinerator. That's Mother's ethics. So it's a very twisted ethics. But I
Well,
think that type of behavior does not necessarily produce a society that is going to be peaceful in the long run. It's going to produce a society of child killers.
I think you're highlighting the real problem with this. It isn't so much that we're not given a sense of what mother thinks is ethical, or that she's behaving in unethical ways to prepare a daughter or train daughter. It's that it's not clear what that end ethical structure is going to look like. And I think that's a core issue, primarily because that is what's motivating her, and that is the threat to daughter. The threat is not getting taken out by some random combat drone. It says she's going to fail an ethical test and be terminated. The filmmakers really needed to lay out a much clearer structure for what it is Mother thought the new humanity would be like, so then we can see if daughter is fitting into that. There's no single ethical structure in human history. Ethics shifts from culture to culture and time to time. So Mother could have one that is what you're describing, that it's ethical to terminate dysfunctional members of society, because what really matters is keeping society as a whole going, keeping it function in a harmonious fashion. Plenty of societies have done that in human history.
Yeah, like the Spartans throwing their babies off the cliff type thing.
Well, and this gets into one of the dilemmas of a storyteller. When you're creating a story like I Am Mother, when you're writing the story, you have to really kind of focus on what the main point is. Is this a treatise on human ethics? It's really not. I mean, it's a creepy sort of sci-fi slash kind of horror movie at times because of how dark everything is and the threat to daughter and all that from this robot running after her and things. But even if the ethical component is not a core theme in the sense of what the story is trying to do, like lay out this is how people should be, without giving a firm foundation, a firm idea of what our antagonist, Mother, has as an end state for the human race, it makes it very hard for the viewer then to understand if daughter is doing things that actually put her in jeopardy or not.
Yeah.
The whole idea of trying to create an ethical human race and that the robot is wiped out humanity because it didn't like the way humanity functioned, I find that an interesting motive. And that goes back to the earlier thing I was talking about how you take this trope and make it interesting one way is motive. But there are some holes in it, as we've been talking about the last few minutes. And yeah, it would have been nice to really get a concept of exactly what Mother thought she was giving daughter, what her world was going to be like.
Hmm.
And just how she justified, in a very clear way, how she justified the extermination of all humanity.
And you could have done that with a scene where a mother, shows like a holographic image that she projects of this is the future world. This is what I'm building for you, daughter. And this is how it's going to function. Like something like that could have worked. The other thing you could have done in this film that could have made it more interesting is you could have played against the trope and made Mother actually a good robot that had evolved and changed from the initial design of the dozers, and that it became mother and daughter against the dozers, trying to destroy them. Like you could have done something like that, which would have been to me more of a surprise because it's playing against trope. What are your thoughts about that way of handling a script like this?
Well, first, it would have created a real threat to both mother and daughter. But I'd say even a more immediate threat to daughter, because then there is an actual external threat. In this case, what she thinks are threats really aren't. The only threat she really has is she going to pass this ethical test or not? In this case, it'd be like, oh, there actually are things out there that are dangerous both to her and mother. I think it would have also helped in making the acting between mother and daughter, which I thought was fairly well done, but it would have given it more depth. Is that it's not just mother playing a role, it is an actual character.
It would have given mother more depth too because she's create like evolved and created her own consciousness by raising daughter and interacting with humans. She has become more human, and so she is going against her original design to be a dozer and destroy inferior humans, this and that. And you could have, and that's where woman comes in. Like woman, it would be like one of the final survivors, and so mother, daughter, and woman gang up in some elaborate plot. Maybe they go and rescue a few other humans. They have to like go into the tunnels and like pat like get through all the dozer infested land to get to the tunnels to get the other humans, and then they all gang up and work together to destroy the dozers and then repopulate humanity with all those embryos that are inside the bunker. Like I I think that could have been more interesting than what we got in this film, especially because as a writer, when you write against the trope that your audience is expecting, it adds more creativity into the film.
Yeah, I don't think I personally have gone that particular route. I think if I were to change this and make Mother more of a protagonist, right, and an independent intelligence, not just a drone being controlled by an AI somewhere else, I think I would have had her at the end sacrifice herself to save daughter and the embryos from like some invading drones or something, and then kind of a maybe a little more bittersweet ending that daughter and her future siblings are still alive, but she's lost mother. I probably would have kept the woman out of this because woman is important for the story we get. But if we're reworking what mother is and her motivations, then I think woman becomes superfluous. We don't need any of that storyline. It just then becomes these two characters and this external threat that eventually gets into the bunker, and mother needs to sacrifice herself, and that becomes the end of her story arc.
Yeah, gotcha. You like the slightly more bleaker endings than I do. I want that happy ending with our plucky gang of heroes, robot and human. Like killing off the bad guys and repopulating the planet. But either way, I think we're both in agreement that a better way to write this would have been to play against that bad robot trope.
I agree. So, is there anything else about the plot you really wanted to get into?
That's it for my notes. What about you?
My main thing with this film that knocked it down a couple of pegs really is that plot twist issue. I mean, there are the all the other plot holes and things we've talked about, but writing a plot twist is an important part of fiction. I think a lot of readers or viewers expect things like that and they want to be surprised. It helps keep your plot fresh and it gives your protagonists new challenges and new growth opportunities. It was very disappointing that the primary plot twist was given away so early. Now, I understand that if you're not reading the text and doing math in your head, you might not pick that up, but I did, and the revelation that daughter was like the third version, and she finds bone fragments in the incinerator, which also is surprising that mother apparently never cleans the incinerator out because it has been at least 16 years since that last corpse was shoved in there. It really did make that twist, which is an important part of the story.
Well, let's jump into the ending then and wrap this up. So, what was your favorite scene, Jeff?
I did not have a favorite scene. What I did enjoy was the acting between mother and daughter. The voice work was great. Claire's acting was fantastic, particularly since in most of the film she is acting opposite a guy in a motion capture suit. I really enjoyed all the screen time with them, and they managed, especially in the first act, to create a nice bit of depth and connection between those two characters. So, not a favorite scene, but basically anything where you have those two really interacting worked really well for me. How about you? Did you have a favorite scene?
I did. I really liked when daughter leaves the bunker with woman and we see the post-apocalyptic hellscape that is Earth. Visually, it was an interesting scene where we see the world that's been overtaken by the dozer robots, and we see a dark world with dead trees and drone planes and things like that, but we also see the reconstruction happening where the robots are farming and making their own city. I just thought it was well done. You get to see like the overhead view as well. I also liked, so then they go through the hellscape, they end up on the beach, and on the beach, we see the shipping crates that the woman calls home. And then we also see this giant rusted shipping barge on its side in the water. And I just enjoyed that. That was another nice post apocalyptic twist. So visually, it was nice once we got out of the bunker. So, what was your least like scene?
I did not like the early reveal of the plot twist. It was mystifying why that was put in there, unless they really just wanted to test to see if viewers are actually reading the text on the screen, but it ruined the plot twist for me. How about you? What was your least favorite scene?
So, it's one that you talked about earlier as well. It's the ending where woman is killed by mother. And we talked a bit about why that is problematic.
Okay. I did want to comment briefly on something, and this is tied into your best scene. Visually, this film is impressive. It is well shot. The special effects are not only competently done, everything looks good, but they look coherent. All the design things for the robots and stuff, it all looks like they come from the same mind. In this case, the artificial intelligence. The exterior scenes fit with the overall goal of the AI to regenerate the Earth. So visually, this movie does a great job. Well, let's get into our panda ratings. On a scale of 0 to 5, Steph, how many pandas would you give I Am Mother?
I gave it 3.5 pandas. While there was some plot holes and issues with mother's motives, the film overall kept me engaged. I found it well paced, had strong acting by Hilary Swank, Clara Rugard, the guy in the bodysuit, and the voice of Mother, Rose Burns. I liked the richness of the world that was built. It just lost a little bit of points for me because of Mother's motives and the ending. What about you, Jeff?
Well, I gave it 3 ethically pure future pandas. In spite of my criticisms, I enjoyed this film. I really like the motives that they gave to the artificial intelligence. And although we focus on plot holes, I found most of those were more annoying than crippling to the story. They're things I may not have done if I was writing it, but it didn't take me too far out of this. The plot twist was the biggest problem for me, and that's why it's only a 3.
So overall, it sounds like we're fairly similar, and we both would recommend this as a better than average science fiction film.
I would agree with that. Better than average.
Okay, well, what do we have coming up next week?
So, next week, we're going to be looking at Fury of the Demon, currently streaming on Amazon. Stream On is a production of Steph and Jeff Wrights Media. Reproduction without written consent is prohibited. All rights reserved. 2021.